controversy with his statements about Nepal's relationship with India and China. Speaking in Kathmandu, the ambassador grossly violated diplomatic conventions as he attempted to project Nepal's ties with India in a negative light while pitching China as a better partner for the Himalayan nation. He said, and I quote, "Unfortunately, you have a neighbor like India. Because India is a huge market, huge potential you can tap into, but at the same time, India's policy towards Nepal and other neighbors are not so friendly and not so beneficial to Nepal." Okay, let's go back to Shri, who is still with us from Washington, D.C. The pot calling the kettle black, that is what the only thing I can think of right now, Shri. Of all countries in the world, China talking about or accusing India of being unneighborly, I mean, that really is very ironical, isn't it? And how undiplomatic of China's top diplomat to make such a statement in public.
Right, Neha. So this is, I would like to call it the Chen Song of, frustration. Why do I say that? Because, under the Belt and Road Initiative, China and Nepal had identified multiple projects on which work was to begin, but work has not begun on many of them, at least on the more important ones. So China is really frustrated. It's, asking Nepal to basically raise the money on its own and get these projects going. And Nepal is very clear. They're saying, unless you give us grants, we don't have the balance sheet, we don't have the wherewithal to implement any of these projects. That is on the Belt and Road Initiative. But the larger picture, Neha, on which China is feeling frustrated is that it is not able to pull China in Nepal away from India and US. So now credit to the Nepalese government. I think Nepal, although it's a very tiny country, I think it's a very, clear of where it wants to be. It doesn't have anything to gain by going into the China camp. Rather, it would maintain good relations with China, of course, but more with India and US. India is strategic importance because we are gateway to the economy. Nepal depends on us for a whole lot of things, including movement of its people, goods, and foreign direct investment into Nepal. And US, because it is the superpower. It is the one which can actually come to Nepal's aid tomorrow if, let's say, there is any kind of a threat, not from India, but from who. So that they need US also to be on their side. And US will give those, give that sort of an assurance or support only as long as Nepal upholds democracy. It keeps up with the global, balance and the role for peace. So unless that happens, Nepal will not get what it wants, which is security of its own borders. So and China obviously doesn't like the fact that despite being a tiny little country, Nepal is trying to fob them away. But that is the reality which China has to deal with. And just then, poking its, a finger in India-Nepal relations and saying that Nepal is not benefiting, which is far from the truth, is just a sign of frustration, yet another sign of frustration, Neha, from China.
Clearly, a very frustrated diplomat talking there in a not so diplomatic fashion. All right, let's now move on to our next story. After reports emerged suggesting that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will travel to Russia later this month to meet the Russian President Vladimir Putin, and amid strong speculation that North Korea could in fact sell arms to Russia to bolster the latter's war effort in Ukraine, the United States has issued a stern warning. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has said North Korea will pay a price and face consequences in the international community for its role in aiding Russia. Well, this shouldn't really come as a surprise to anyone. Shri, we'll discuss this with you in just a moment, but before that, let's listen in.
In terms of the reports about a potential meeting between the North Korean leader and President Putin, I don't have anything specific to provide in terms of a potential meeting, nor am I going to speculate on when such a meeting could occur. You have heard the White House talk about the fact that Kim Jong-un is seeking to continue diplomatic engagement with Russia as a follow-on to the Russian defense minister's recent visit, where Russia is seeking to purchase artillery ammunition from the DPRK. As I highlighted last week, such a sale would violate multiple United Nations Security Council resolutions, and it would prolong the unnecessary suffering of Ukrainian civilians who are impacted by Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine. So again, from a U.S. government standpoint, we would call on North Korea to refrain from selling ammunition and arms to Russia, which would unnecessarily prolong this conflict.
Okay, let's go back to Shri for more on this. Shri, this doesn't really come as a surprise. The United States issuing this warning, saying North Korea will pay a price and there'll be consequences if it does in fact supply arms to Russia amid the ongoing Ukraine war. But the bigger question is, are we really going to see Kim Jong-un traveling to Russia, meeting the Russian president? Are we really going to see such an arms deal going through? Isn't that $1 million question at the moment?
So, Neha, the probability is very high, and in fact, it may happen between the 10th and 13th of September when there's an economic meeting that's taking place, in Russia. So he will be traveling for that, and the chances are very high that some sort of a deal on the ammunition arms front may also be done, because let's not forget that, in June this year, June or July this year, the Russian defense minister actually, traveled to North Korea, and that has not happened in a very, very long time as far as Russia is concerned. So what's happening is North Korea has been a pariah for a very long time. Now, Russia, because of its own global sanctions and the fact that it's fighting a war, it's running out of ammunition. It has been sourcing, as we now know, ammunition from North Korea, especially shells aimed at tanks. And this is despite a UN resolution banning North Korea from supplying any arms to any country. And incidentally, Russia is a signatory to that resolution. So this is already a violation of the UN, agreement. Now, what is the reason that Kim Jong-un is grabbing this opportunity with both hands? Obviously, because it gives him a slightly more, importance in the global framework. He was neglected, lying in a corner. He runs a small country, impoverished country with $24 billion of GDP. Now suddenly he gets face time with Putin, where he can start negotiating what his country wants in return, which would obviously be a lot of aid and food and other help, investment, but also what his pet project has been in terms of nuclear capability. So he has been playing around with nuclear missiles. He launches one and tests, one every now and then as a show of strength. But he lacks some critical technology which would enable him to fulfill his dream of sending, nuclear missiles from his continent to, let's say, the US, which has been his dream. So if Russia is able to provide that sort of technology, then it could be a different kind of a world that we're looking at. So for the sake of that, I hope it doesn't go that far. But the fact remains that right now, Russia does need ammunition to continue its, war against Ukraine, because it's fast depleting its own supply. And North Korea, incidentally, has the kind of shells which can work with, Russia's existing hardware, defense hardware. So that is very convenient for Russia. Russia also needs people to now someone to buy its own grains and oil. So that is another thing Russia could sell. So this could be a win-win. But I hope, for the sake of this world, that Mr. Putin stops short of selling some sort of critical nuclear technology to North Korea, because then we're looking at a very different kind of a world, Neha, because Kim Jong-un is unfortunately a loose cannonball and very unpredictable. And with very little loose, you never know how he's going to behave. If he's truly nuclear armed and has the capability to launch a missile at, let's say, South Korea or the US.
All right. On that note, Shri, thank you so much for putting all those global stories into perspective for our viewers. We're going to finally let you catch your breath. Great to have you as always. Look forward to seeing you again tomorrow night on Global Lens.
My pleasure, Neha. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Shri. All right, on that note, let's now shift our focus to climate change and the havoc that it is causing across the globe. Let's start with Brazil. Southern Brazil has been hit by a devastating cyclone, leading to severe flooding in multiple cities. At least 22 people have lost their lives and hundreds have been displaced by the flooding. Authorities in the state of Rio Grande do Sul reported that approximately 60 cities were impacted by the storm, causing widespread damage and displacement. The cyclone is the latest in a series of extreme weather events in Brazil, highlighting the increasing frequency and intensity of storms driven by climate change. Governor Eduardo Leite noted that this flooding event marked the highest death toll from a climate-related event in the state, with 15 deaths reported in the city of Macomb alone. The Brazilian president has expressed solidarity with the affected population and announced the dispatch of civil defense teams to help address the issues caused by heavy rains. The devastating impact of the cyclone underscores the urgent need for climate resilience measures, not just in that region, but indeed around the globe.
Hundreds of people were saved, hundreds of people were rescued. But unfortunately, I have now received information that 15 bodies have been located in the town of Moshum. This causes us immense pain. It raises the death toll from 6 to 21, already making it the highest death toll in a climatic event in the state of Rio Grande do Sul.
And as we said, climate change is wreaking havoc across several parts of the globe. It's not just Brazil, Greece as well. Just recently, the country was battling wildfires and now it is grappling with floods. Severe rainstorms have impacted Greece, Turkey and Bulgaria, resulting in at least 11 deaths. The storm, referred to as Daniel by Greek meteorologists, has been battering the region since Monday. The central Greek region of Magnesia and its capital Volos, located 300 kilometers north of Athens, have been particularly impacted by the storm. It has caused extensive damage to buildings and roads in nearby villages due to landslides and flooding. Electricity has in fact been out in Volos since Tuesday. These torrential rains follow weeks of devastating wildfires in Greece, further compounding the challenges faced by the region. All right, that's all the time we have on this edition of Global Lens. Thank you so much for watching. But coming up, India has promised to decarbonize its economy and eliminate fossil fuel imports by 2047. It cannot be achieved without green hydrogen, built as the fuel of the future. Commercial road transportation that governs the consumer price can be run cheaper on green hydrogen. It will replace fossil fuels from hard to abate sectors such as steel, cement and also fertilizers. Watch Green Hydrogen, this documentary, on the other side.
BrahMos, stealthy, lethal, precise. It flies at 3 times the speed of sound and cuts through a warship like a hot knife through butter. China's navy has threatened its neighbors, and they are turning to